All right, so the live streaming seems to have been started. Fine. So I have also added the YouTube streaming link for today's session in the respective calendar event. You can go and check the YouTube link being present there. Fine. So let me quickly start sharing my screen. So please let me know as and when my screen becomes visible to you.
No,
All right, I am hoping that my paint screen is now visible to all.
yes,
All right. So today I am gonna be giving you a brief introduction to JavaScript language, and from today onwards itself, we will start writing some basic JavaScript programs. I would try to explain you that how a simple enough JavaScript program actually executes, what all things go behind the scenes, and probably a few other minor things with respect to JavaScript related to the execution of its program. So the point of discussion today is going to be all around JavaScript. Well, as all of you know, that JavaScript is also a programming language like many others that are available in the market today, be it C, C++, Java, Python. There are many other programming languages available, and JavaScript is definitely one of those. Right? When JavaScript was initially built, it was actually meant to be used only inside the browser. It used to uh, be acting like a glue when it was initially created for the HTML pages so that you can bring a little bit of interactivity in the web pages that you build. So let's say you are writing a small enough HTML page, let's say, which is just going to accept some inputs from the user and is probably going to perform some calculations over those inputs and present you with the output. So probably for these things, in order to make your code page more interactive, JavaScript was the way to go for you. But over time, people realized that JavaScript is so powerful that we should bring it out of the browser as well. Because initially, JavaScript was only meant to be run inside a browser. It could not be run or executed outside a browser. But over time, people realized its power, that how powerful, how useful the language is, and the runtime for JavaScript languages, the JavaScript language are built. One of the very popular runtime for JavaScript nowadays is actually Node.js. You might have heard about Dino as well, which is not quite popular, but the popularity for the Dino framework has now been increasing, with the time. But one of the popular runtimes that I'm assuming that most of you would have heard about by today's date is going to be Node.js. So today's discussion is not going to be around Node.js, but I'm just giving you a you know top level overview of what actually Node.js is. On a very bottom line, Node.js is actually a JavaScript runtime. Okay, just a minute. Okay, Node.js, it is a JavaScript runtime. JavaScript runtime is basically what it you can understand it as a software which is going to provide an environment for the JavaScript language to execute itself. without a runtime, you cannot execute JavaScript. Now, you might be thinking that how you were able to execute JavaScript even before Node.js came into the picture. So we were running JavaScript till then in the browser. So browser itself is actually a JavaScript environment, or you can say a JavaScript runtime. So browser is also an example of a JavaScript runtime, just like Node.js. Initially, only browser existed. Node.js has come, recently. I won't say recently, but a significant time after the browser, right? So both of these two things, Node.js as well as the browser, they both are the JavaScript runtimes. That means they provide the environment for the JavaScript execution to happen, right? And each of this runtime actually makes use of another program, another software, which is known as JavaScript engine. Now, this JavaScript engine is actually what is responsible for executing your JavaScript program. It is the engine which is interpreting your code and is trying to find out what needs to be done, what action needs to be taken further whenever it interprets any given line of your program that you have written in the JavaScript language. So, what is runtime and how is it different from the engine? So, you have to understand it like this, that runtime is actually a bigger box. This is JS runtime. And JavaScript engine is just one component of that. So this is JS engine. JS engine is just one component of the JavaScript runtime. In addition to that, whatever things that this JavaScript engine actually requires, well, going forward into this course, we will be studying about a lot of APIs that are provided by the runtime, and of course are not they do not really come with the JavaScript engine. They are actually provided by the runtime. I am just putting out those examples right here. You don't need to worry about what these things right now are. We will be studying about all these things going forward into the lectures whenever we will reach that certain content. So there are going to be things like set timeout API. Set timeout, you might have heard about fetch from the Modern Application Development 1 course. A little bit of introduction about fetch was already given in one of the lectures, if I can remember it correctly. And there are going to be many other APIs which are actually provided by the runtime. And there are several other functions which the runtime is responsible for performing. And JavaScript engine is just one component of runtime. Right? So engine, what all it does is it interprets your JavaScript code and it tries to execute it. So all it knows is understand your JavaScript code, executes it. Every other thing, every other function that you use or any other external APIs that you make use of, they are actually provided by the runtime. And that is why you will somehow find the difference or sometimes find the difference between two different runtimes, implementing the same approach, implementing the same logic in two different ways. Let's say if I try to execute a certain logic in a Node.js environment or in a browser environment, it is possible that the implementations might differ a bit. Well, in most of the cases, or in majority of the cases, I would say the implementation is going to remain the same, but there are going to be certain things which will be different. Well, the very major difference that you can think of right now between these two environments is going to be the availability of the window object. Right. So whatever you see actually on a web page, let's say if I'm currently on this Replit screen, and since I am opening it on a browser, this is actually a web page for me, right? There will be some respective HTML, CSS, JavaScript available for this particular web page, and the layout, the UI of this web page is being shown to me because the way the web page for this particular thing has been coded. So the web page that would be created for this particular layout is going to be having certain divs, certain span tags, certain heading tags, many other tags that you can think of in the HTML language. And all of these things that you see, they are actually all contained in a single object, which is known as window object. Because window object is what is responsible for rendering the entire design for you, the entire layout or the entire UI for you. Whatever you are writing in a web page, that is already contained or automatically contained inside a window object. And window object access is only available in the browser. Let's say if I go to one of the browser tabs and I try to open console here, I'll go to inspect, I will go to console, and the only thing I will type here is going to be window, that's all. The moment I do that, you can see that it has printed a window object for me. and it has a lot of properties. So you can think of these properties coming from the window object, or you can say from the runtime. These are the properties that are provided by the runtime. This window object is provided by the runtime. But if I try to write the same thing, that means if I try to write a window object in a different runtime environment, so I have already opened this Replit window for you, and I have created a JavaScript project here, or not actually JavaScript, I have created a Node.js project here. That means I will try to execute JavaScript here, but the runtime environment that will be used behind the scenes is going to be the Node.js. And if I try to find out what the window object here actually is, I won't write any code here for now because we have not written a single statement of code so far. I would open Node interactive terminal here. And now I will type window. So here I am actually getting an error saying that window is not defined. That means it is not able to find out what the meaning of window here is. But when I try to do the same thing, okay, looks like the browser is lagging a little. Uh, I hope I'm properly audible to all.
So, sir, this node environment is JavaScript runtime,
Yes, Node.js is actually a JavaScript runtime. Yes.
or this browser, JavaScript, which is written in a browser.
Hmm.
This is JavaScript engine.
No, no, no. See, what I wrote here is just a minute. This browser is actually lagging a bit. So let me close these things from here. Probably open it in some other browser. Okay, just a minute. See, both the browser as well as Node.js, they are JavaScript runtime environments. They are of the same level. So if I talk about browser and Node.js, both of them are actually the examples of JS runtime. JS engine, as I told you before, is just one component of the runtime. And the JS engine that is being utilized by both of these runtime environments might be different. For example, if I specifically talk about Chrome, Chrome is a browser, as all of you know. But the JavaScript engine that the Chrome makes use of is V8. V8 is actually a JavaScript engine that I told you before, as it is responsible for interpreting and executing your JavaScript code. That's all it does. If there are any other additional functions that are provided by the environment, they are not directly coming with the engine, but they are actually provided by the runtime, the JavaScript runtime that you are making use of for executing your code. Similarly, if I talk about Node.js and Chrome, they are almost similar. I mean, I'm talking about the runtime, and they actually make use of the same JavaScript engine. V8 is being used by both Chrome as well as Node.js. Whereas if you talk about some other browsers, say Firefox or Edge, they actually makes use of different JavaScript engines, and those JavaScript engines are SpiderMonkey, and Chakra. So these two are the uh, JavaScript engines that are used by other two browsers like Firefox, or popular browsers, I would say, Firefox and the Edge. Chrome makes use of V8, and Node.js, which is actually another JavaScript runtime, also makes use of the same runtime that the Chrome makes use of, which is actually V8. So browser and Node.js, they are actually the runtimes. And engine is just one component of it. And that engine can vary depending upon the runtime. As I told you, that Chrome is a browser, is a runtime. It makes use of V8. SpiderMonkey, it is used by Mozilla Firefox. Chakra is used by Edge, things like that.
Okay, sir, got it. So, sir, the actual JavaScript code which like engine is running or runtime is running? Like V8 is running JavaScript code or this browser
If
and
you talk about
Node.js?
the actual
हाँ
interpreter is V8.
yes sir. कौन है? हाँ सर
V8. I mean the
V8
engine.
okay okay.
All right. Yeah.
Sir, I have a question. So here
Yeah. Tell
we
me.
is
Sir,
the hello.
this
Uh,
GS engine
One at a
like a
time,
byte
guys.
code.
Shailendra, can you please wait? Let us go by the queue.
Yes, yes, sure, sir. Yes.
Who was the other person?
Yes, I was asking. So V8 is the JS engine, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And what are Spider Monkey and the other one?
They are also JavaScript engines.
Okay, so Mozilla Firefox uses that one.
Yeah, Mozilla Firefox uses SpiderMonkey. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Shailendra.
Yes. So the in this engine and the JVM Java bytecode engine, Java bytecode, what are are the functions are similar or different?
No. See, I am not talking about Java here. See, the way Java works is the way JRE, the JTK and all. I don't really want to get into those things right now. I would like to tell you that JavaScript is a interpreted language,
Right, sir?
right? So
So what
interpreted
is the
language
difference?
means that,
The interpreted, what is this interpreted? I'm not getting it. Python is also
see, there are
interpreted
two
language?
things. There are two things.
Python is,
One is
yeah.
compiler. The other one is interpreter.
Okay, sir.
Right? Both of them are responsible for converting your code and executing your code.
Perfect, sir.
Okay. What compiler does is compiler converts entire program file into object code, and execute it. It converts the entire program file. Now, since it is
Oh,
converting the entire program file, that means if your entire program file, if it has error at any place, it is going to tell you all the errors collectively in the beginning of the compilation process or after the compilation process, even before you start your execution, because it is
perfect.
compiling the entire
Right,
program at once. So it will
right,
scan
sir.
through your entire file, your entire code, will find out all the errors that your program has, and will let you know even before the execution. But interpreter, what it does is it converts one line at a time.
Right, sir. I got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Fine. So JavaScript is an interpreted language.
Right,
That
sir.
means if you have written a program, let's say of 100 lines, and you have made an error at 99th line, so JavaScript runtime will allow you to execute your program. Your program will run absolutely fine till line number 98. But as soon as the interpreter reaches the line number 99, it will throw an error.
Okay, sir.
All right. So this is I would say a few of the characteristics of JavaScript language. Like I told you, it is an interpreted language. In order to execute JavaScript, you need a JavaScript runtime environment, and runtime environment internally requires a JavaScript engine, which interprets and executes your JavaScript code. And runtime does manage a lot of other things that we will get to know going forward into this course. I have already given you some basic examples, like some external APIs that are provided, be it set timeout, be it fetch, etc. So all these are provided by the runtimes.
Sir,
Now, yes,
so Python is not an interpreted language, right?
Python is an interpreted language.
So, but okay, but if there is some error, it will not execute it, right? Okay.
No, Python will execute your program. It will only complain when the error comes.
Okay, sir. So suppose in the 100th line there is an error, so 99 lines will get executed in Python also.
Yeah, correct. Okay, fine. Now, talking about writing the very first JavaScript program, since this is the very first lecture introducing you guys to JavaScript language, I am assuming that all of you, since are coming from the application development one background, so you already have a fair idea about Python language. You probably know about many various or several other functions that you probably use in Python. I am assuming since you have also used Flask, so you will also be aware of some advanced concepts too. But I don't really require the advanced knowledge as of now. All I want you to know is some basic Python data structures like string, like dictionary, like list, etc. So can I assume that all of you guys are aware of these things, these Python data structures?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, fine. Now in Python, if you are required to write a simple enough, let's say string on the console, what you would do is you would make use of the print function. You would make use of the print function, and whatever you provide to this print function, whatever value that you provide will actually be shown onto the console as it is. If you're making use of variables in the print statement, that is absolutely fine. They will actually be converted to their current values by the time this print statement or this print function is being executed. Now, JavaScript is also very much similar if you want to just write a hello world program, but just the function name changes. Here, you are making use of print. In JavaScript, what you will do is you will actually use console API. Now, again, the API that you are using here, console, this is provided by the runtime environment. This is actually an API which is provided by the runtime environment. Console is an API and it provides you several functions that you can make use of in order to print something onto the browser console. And the very popular function that people use or we will also be using here is going to be log. Console is an API, log is a function of that API. What it does is it says that I want to log something on the console. I want to log something on the console and it will be treated as just like a function. Console.log, and whatever you would want to print onto the console, you just type that thing here, and after you execute that program, the exact message will be printed onto the console or the output screen. Let me quickly show you a simple enough example too.
Sir, can I ask one thing?
Yes.
Sir, this window is an object, no, sir?
Yes, this is an object. Yeah.
So, sir, console is an object or an API?
See, of course, you would say that it's an object, but when you are talking about several other functions bunched together, so you would say that all those functions are actually provided by an API. So console is known as an API, and
Okay,
this
okay.
API comes with a lot of functions, and one of those functions that we are going to make use of in today's session is going to be log. I can probably tell you about other functions as well, and yeah, maybe we can have a discussion over that too. So see, when you write console, you can say that it is an API. Logically, I would say it is an API, but also, as you said, which is absolutely correct, that it is also treated as an object.
Basically, it's a class. It's a module that it's a we can treat it as a file that has multiple functions. So it's a bunch of multiple functions that is like imported as a API.
Well, for the sake of understanding, you can say it is correct, but even going forward into the sessions, you will see that the class inheritance that is being used in JavaScript is not actually the same inheritance that you have used in other languages like C++ or Java. JavaScript makes use of prototype-based inheritance that also works with objects only. So we are treating everything as objects in JavaScript. Okay, so see, as soon as I did this here, console dot, it has given me a list of functions that I can use on this particular object. And one of these is actually log. Once I do that, I will have to call it as a function, just like you call any other function in any given language. You always have to use these parentheses. And here you can provide the message that you want to be printed onto the console. So I am going to write just the hello world. Hello world. Right. Now you can click on this run button here that is available on the top of your screen here, the green button. And as soon as you do that, you will get to see this output onto the console. The same thing if you will try to run in a browser environment, you will get the same thing. I think I was running it here. So if I put it here, I'm getting the same thing here, hello world. Just ignore this undefined for now. We will discuss about this in the later sessions, why this undefined comes. But what matters to us right now is this hello world coming out. Now,
So, one
yes.
question. So,
Yes.
can we understand this console as a different space, separate space as part of the browser or the system?
Sorry, can you please? Okay, I kind of lost you. Can you please repeat your last statement once again?
Yeah, can we understand console as a separate space inside the browser, within the browser? Is it that way, or is my understanding different? Yeah.
No, I disagree with this.
So we can see separate, tabs for console, sources, network.
See,
So
this is just the browser. I mean, this is how the browser presents it. See, the console API and the console, you can say it, might be a coincidence here that wherever you are seeing all these messages here, this section is also known as console.
So,
So
is it
actually, what you are doing is you are trying to mix up between the console API and the browser console. They both are two different things.
okay? So, what do I understand from the console? What I'm seeing in the browser? Is it a separate space?
Yeah, it is a section which is well contained within a browser environment, which gives you the access of all the logs.
Okay. Okay. So, logs is a separate space in the physical domain. I mean, the physical hardware.
See, whenever you are developing a web application, many a times you run into errors and you are required to debug that issue, right? So
Yeah.
where are you actually get informed about those issues? It is the console. Console is the space where you will get to see all the information that you try to log from your application. And in case your application is running into an error, you will get to see those things here in the console itself.
Okay. So, in terms of JavaScript, it is named as console, is it, or is it different name in a different world?
See, browser console, you can understand it as a completely different thing. It has nothing to do with the JavaScript console API.
Okay.
Browser console is just a section which is giving you the access to all the logs that your application is generating. I'm talking about
Likewise,
the front end.
okay. So likewise, in the other, I mean, other than browser, you had a console in a different replit or somewhere. So that is
Exactly.
also
See, even if okay, where was the replit here? Even this is console for me.
okay. So this is a separate space.
Yeah, console is just you can treat it as a separate space where you get to see the output or the logs that your application generates. See, even if you're running your Python program, you get to see your output in the console.
Okay. 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 So thank you. Yeah.
All right, so with the help of console.log, you can print pretty much any message that you want to, and you can replace this log function with any other function that comes with this console API, or you can say this console namespace or object. Right. One of those functions can be warn. So you might have heard about the log levels, right? Whenever you are trying to log something, whenever you are trying to generate logs for your application, so you try to categorize those logs into based on certain log levels, like based on how critical those logs are. Let's say if a log that you are trying to generate with the help of your application is just an information for you, and that does not really is going to help you in debugging in case your application run into an error. So you would try to give it the lowest log level that actually exists, and it is going to be the log itself. So if I talk about the log levels, I think the lowest is going to be log, or I think lowest is going to be debug. Lowest is going to be debug. Then comes log. After that comes warning, I guess. The highest one is going to be critical. And I think I'm missing something.
Info, sir. Info.
Sir, info.
Yeah, info is the one. Yes. So these are generally the log levels that are defined, for generating logs. If you want to just, generate some logs which are going to act as some extra information whenever you want to see how your application is performing, you would probably try to put them with the log levels of log and debug. Info means it is treated as a, log level with a little bit of extra priority as compared to log and debug. And the same thing happens with warning, critical, error, etc. There is also this error as well. So generally you use warn, error, and critical for generating the logs which are actually useful for you, which will help you in debugging the issue if your application runs into an error. So the same functions are actually being used here with the console API. Just like we have made use of log function, we try to print this hello world on the console here. If I try to run this, I am going to get the same exact output. I will get hello world only. You can see I'm getting hello world only. And even if I replace this warn with error, if I replace this with error, I am going to get the exactly same thing even now. Right. So all of these are just the log levels. Now, depending upon the configuration that you have set for your application, what you would generally do is that based on the log level you are using, these logs will be put into a separate file. Let's say all the logs that are being generated with the help of debug and the log functions, they will be put into a separate file. All the logs generated with the error log level or the warning log level, they will be put into a separate file. So that whenever there is an issue, you only get to see the relevant logs for you, which can actually help you in identify what the root cause of the problem is. So that is why all of these functions come with the console API. And depending upon your use case, you can choose the log level or the function that you want to generate log with. Does this make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Now, this was just about writing a simple in a JavaScript program. Well, this is just a simple practice or a common practice that we follow while learning any new programming language. What we try to do is we try to print hello world onto the console while learning a new programming language. Now, let's move one step forward and let's talk about two building blocks of any programming language. One is going to be variables, and another one is going to be operators. Well, if I talk about operators specifically, JavaScript is probably not too different from Python. The operators that you use in Python programming language, arithmetic operators, maybe the logical operators are gonna be different in this particular language, but most of the operators are gonna remain the same because you already have learned one programming language, so operators won't be an issue. But now talking about variables, every programming language has its own way, has its own style of creating, defining, and working with variables. And JavaScript has its own way too. The first thing that I want you to understand here is that JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. Okay, let me first move to Paint. Okay, there are two things. One is statically typed programming language, and one is dynamically typed programming language. Does anyone know the difference between the two? Anyone?
So dynamic
in
means when we
static,
are like setting a variable, you can change the data type. Like it is not fixed while assigning the variable.
While assigning the variable, is it?
Sir, we didn't need to define data type like int, float, such
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. So data type is actually required while declaration. So whenever you are trying to create a new variable, you have to define what type of value or what type of data this variable is going to be holding for this particular program. If there is a requirement to specify this data type, then that programming language will be termed as a statically typed programming language. Has anyone worked with any such language before?
So C++.
Any example?
Java. Java is
Yes.
static.
Java is an example of this language, and maybe if you have worked with C++, it also behaves the same.
Yes, sir.
Whereas in dynamically typed language, data type is not required. Data type is not required while declaring or creating variables. Can anyone give me an example for dynamically typed programming language?
Python.
Python.
The example is going to be Python. And along with Python, there will be one more option that will get added up here. The programming language that we are starting to learn in today's session. This is going to be JS. So JS is also a dynamically typed programming language. Now, you would have gotten a fair idea that in JavaScript, you won't be required to actually specify what type of data you will be holding in any variable that you create. And JavaScript will be automatically able to interpret or understand depending upon the value you assign to that particular variable to find out what is going to be the data type of that particular variable. But my question is that data type is not required while declaring variables, that I understand. But let's say you create a variable and you are holding some integer data in that. Is it possible for you to put a string value later on into the same variable? Let's say the same variable is being used for storing a string value at a later point of time in the same program. Do you think it is possible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Can you do it in Python?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Sir, what the question is?
The question is that if you have created a variable and the first value that you initialized that variable with is a integer value, or you can say is a number value. Now, can you store a string value in the same variable in the very next line?
No, sir.
Yes.
No.
If
Yes,
No.
we can put by using
We can reassign.
Okay, so I am getting a mixed of responses here.
sir,
So maybe
if a variable declared in dynamically typed, then we can store different type of data in a variable.
all right. So how many of you think that this can be done? You can just raise your hand. Okay, quite a many of you think that you can change the data type of a variable even after initializing it in a dynamically typed language. Fine, you can lower your hands now. And those of you who think this cannot be done, are there any who think that once a variable is initialized with a given value, it cannot be updated with a value of different data type? Okay, I have already written the example here. Let's say you create a variable A, you initialize it with the value 10. Now, in the very next line, can you initialize it with the value hello? So I am assuming that every of you is saying that yes, it can be done. Maybe many of you would have tried doing it in Python language. That's why you are saying that. And this is absolutely true. In dynamically typed language, this actually happens because the data type of the variable is interpreted after seeing what type of value it is holding. But do you think is the same behavior possible with a statically typed language?
No.
No, sir.
No,
In
sir.
statically typed language, this is not possible. If you have created or declared a variable to be of integer type, you cannot store string type of data in that variable. So what do you think? Which type of programming language is flexible? Statically typed, dynamically typed is a flexible programming language, and so does is JavaScript, just like Python. All right. So variables. Now we have talked about that JavaScript is actually a dynamically typed programming language. That means you don't need to declare the data type of the variable beforehand. But how do you actually create the variables? That is what the first question is. In Python, how you used to create variables? You simply choose your variable name. Let's say you choose the variable name to be A, and then you simply assign it with some value 10. And okay, you don't need semicolons in Python, and that's all. In the very next line, you can say print A, and this would work absolutely fine in a programming language like Python. Do you agree with this?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes, sir.
in JavaScript, there are actually some keywords that you must make use of in order to create variables. I'm saying that there are some keywords that you have to use while creating variables. I'm not saying that those keywords are used to identify the data type of the variable. Data type and the keywords that you will be creating those variables with, they are two different things. And how are they different? I will try to explain that. But in JavaScript, the keywords that you can use for creating variables are actually three. One is where, let, and the last one is const. Now, out of these three, where and let might seem new to you, but const is something that you guys have already seen before in other programming languages too, be it in Java or C++ as well. Right? You use const in order to declare a variable to be constant. And once you declare a variable to be constant, what does it mean?
It is fixed. You cannot change it.
Yes. After that, you cannot change the value of that variable. You cannot increment that, you cannot decrement that, or you cannot override that, or you cannot reinitialize that, you can say. Fine. So this is the behavior of const. But yeah, anyways, these three are the keywords that you use in order to create variables in JavaScript. Now, whichever you use right now, well, at least for the sake of today's session, we can use any of these three keywords. Doesn't really matter. Well, we will try to use where and let in today's session. Const is something that is actually recommended. Even if you're writing production level applications, you would be recommended to use as many as variables with the const keyword as you can. Well, the reason for that is something that we will probably discuss in a later part of this course. Why does it actually happen? But for now, I am going to talk about the differences. That what are the differences and why three different keywords actually exist here. Okay. So firstly, I will try to create a variable with the help of this where keyword, and I would say a equals to 10, and I would simply print its value onto the console. So I am using the console.log function. You could use warn function, you can use error function, whichever function you like. I am using log function here. And if I want the value of this variable to be printed, then I can simply write the name of the variable, which is a. That's all I need to do. And if I click on run, I am getting the value of this variable, which is 10. You can even change the value of this variable. Let's say I can make it 50, or let's say 58. If I click on run, I will get this new value, that is 58. So that means the output that I'm getting here is depending upon the value of this particular variable a. I hope everyone agrees with this.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the same variable, but with a different keyword, and this time it is going to be 58 only. Let's keep the value to be same, or maybe let's change it to 60. Now, what do you think, or what do you expect the output to be?
58.
60. 60.
Okay.
Oh, no, 60.
All of you are saying that the output is going to be 60, which is absolutely correct. Yes, the output is going to be 60 indeed. Fine. So this is working the same way as we used where, but let us try to do the same thing with the const and see if that works the behave, or that behaves the same way. If I try to execute this code, the output that I'll get is going to be 70. So we have tried using all these three different keywords, but all of these are seeming to behave the same in the very first glance, as we have seen right now. But that is not the actual use case. What makes all of these three keywords different, or I would try to put let and const in one category and where in another category. So where I would try to put it in a category, and let and const, they can be put together in a other category that is different from where, but let and const, they actually behave the same. And What is that category? On what basis? On what parameters I am trying to create those categories? That parameter is actually the scope. Do you guys know about scope? What is scope? Scope of a variable?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The scope of a variable can be defined as the area or the block where that variable can be accessed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Just like in C++ or C, you can create local scopes. It is entirely possible to do that in JavaScript as well. What do I mean by creating local scopes here is you can use these set of curly braces and this would create a local scope for you. See, one scope is this. One scope is this. And another scope is this. So this is, I mean, the selected portion right now is the child scope of this scope where we had been writing the program so far. And I am trying to create another scope here with the help of these two curly braces. Whenever you create or write these two curly braces, you are actually trying to create a new scope or a local scope, you can say. Now, if I try to create a variable here, let's say C, and I assign it some value, say 20, console.log A, and I try to print this value outside this scope. What do you expect the output now?
20.
Nothing.
20
No,
twice or
plus
what?
undefined. Because your variable is C, sir. So you're
No, sir. Yeah. We get
20.
20
Okay.
twice, man.
Okay, let's do one thing. Whatever
20,
you think
20,
that the
20.
output of this program is going to be, you can type it in the chat.
Could you show the code now again?
Yeah, sure. I can paste the code in the chat as well. So this is the JavaScript code that you need to predict the output for. So 2020 is what one person says. 20 twice. Fine. I'll wait for a few other responses too.
It give error, I think.
Okay.
Because
Different C and
So
total.
it prints A first and then gives an error.
Okay. First the value of A, which is 20, and then the error. Yeah, fine. Makes sense. 20 and undefined. Fine. Okay. All right. Now I will try to execute this program, and the output here, which will show up, is going to be 20 twice. 20 will be printed twice. Sorry.
Variable.
Yes.
C will be a
Yeah, the variable name is C.
so yeah, let me see.
Now it
Now
will
it
be
give 2020.
2020.
The output is going to be 20. Now,
Yes.
I have a question to all of those who predict the output to be the exactly same. That is 20 twice. Why is it so? See, in any other programming language that you would think, if you have created a scope, if you have created a local scope, any variables that you create there, by analogy, whatever you have learned so far, that variable can only be accessed, or the scope of that variable is restricted to that particular block in which it is created. And how are you able to access the value of the C variable even outside?
Sir, because
With
where
global
we have
variable.
function
Where is
scope.
Okay, one at a
global
time,
scope?
please. One at a time. Maybe you can
Global
just raise
scope.
your hands. All right. Yes, Suresh, please go ahead.
I think where is a global scope, so it is the value is same throughout the program.
Okay. All right. Fine. Next person, Aryaman. Yes, Surya.
Sir, where is the function scoped? So
Where is
outside.
function scope? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a precise statement. Yes, that's true. All right. Now I am going to make a small tweak in this program, a small tweak, and then I would ask you to predict the output. Okay, let's make it let. Now, what do you think? What is going to be the output in this case?
20 and undefined.
So,
One time 20.
yeah, no,
And
there
error.
is give reference error. So one time 20 and reference error.
Reference error.
Okay. So if I click on run here, you can see I will get 20 and a reference error. It's taking time to execute it here. Well, anyways, it came. So firstly, you can see the output came out to be 20. And after that, it is saying that at like line number 88, there is an error. You are trying to access a variable which is not defined. Now,
So
comparing
what
the
is the
behavior
meaning
of
of
this,
undefined?
sorry,
What is the meaning of undefined?
I would come to that. I would come to that.
Okay, sir.
So the difference here is that when I were trying to access the value of C, when I created it using var keyword, I was even able to access it outside the local scope where that particular variable was created. But when I simply change that keyword from var to let, suddenly the scope of that variable is getting restricted to that particular block only, and I cannot access it outside. So this is the very first difference that you have to understand between the two categories of these variables. One is let and const, the other one is var. Var actually have functional based scope. You can say function based scope. That means if you have created a variable with the help of a var keyword outside a function, then it becomes global. The scope of that particular variable becomes global. I cannot say that any variable created using var is having global scope. No, that is going to be a wrong statement, because I am saying that var has a function level scope, or you can say functional scope. That means if you create, functional scope. So if you create a variable using var keyword, that variable can only be accessed within that particular function. And if you have created that variable outside a function, that means you can use it pretty much everywhere in the entire program, because it assumes that if it is created inside a function, then only its scope is restricted. But if it is outside of a function, then you can use it pretty much anywhere in the entire program. So this is what the scope of var is. And if I talk about let and const, they are going to have the block scope. Block scope means they will only be accessed, or they will only be available to be accessed within the scope or within the local scope they are created in, or they were declared in. So if you talk about this thing, this example, this was a local scope. And if you create this variable using let keyword, then its scope is restricted between line numbers 86 and 89. You cannot use this particular variable C outside, or before line number 86 or after line number 89. That cannot be done. The same thing applies for const as well. If I simply replace this with const, there is going to be no difference. I am going to get the same thing, 20 and the error. You can see same thing. Okay, so the first difference between the two categories of these keywords is var has the functional scope, let and const have the block level scope. Just to prove this, that var actually has a function level scope, what will I do is I will create a function here. So in JavaScript,
Sir, before you proceed further, can I ask a question?
Yeah, yes, please.
When we get this 20 printed and with an undefined for the second one, so we're saying it is the block one which is printing, and the second one, since it does not have a reference for that variable C, it does not print, it just prints undefined. Is that true?
That's true.
Now, if outside the block I were to give C another value, then would it print that value?
Yeah, of course, it would work.
So that means the same
Because
C would have...
outside the block, C doesn't even exist. And if you are trying to assign some value to a variable named C here, that means you are creating a new variable for this scope.
Okay.
Right? So let's say if you do let C equals to 30 here. Now this would work.
So var acts sort of like creating a variable, sort of a global variable, if not global, at least within that particular what would you call this whole thing?
As I said, it is having the function based scope. So if you create a variable using var within a function, then the scope is restricted to that particular function only. But if you end up creating a variable outside a function with the help of var keyword, then it tends to get the global scope.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Fine. So as I was telling you that I would create a function here just to prove that yes, var has a function level scope and you cannot use a variable created inside a function using var keyword outside. So in JavaScript, creating functions is as easy as creating functions in Python too. In Python, you used to use this def keyword and then the function name like def abc, and with the help of indentation, you basically write the logic for your program. But in JavaScript, what you do is instead of using this def, just like you use it in Python, in JavaScript, you use the function keyword itself. You simply use the function keyword itself. And after that, you define the name for the function, just like you do it in Python. Let's say it is ABC. Use these curly braces, but sorry, not the curly braces, the round braces or the parentheses, so that in case this function accepts any parameters, you can define those parameters. And now you will have to use these two curly braces. You will have to use these two curly braces. Can someone tell me why you have to use these two curly braces, or what is the significance of using these two curly braces here?
For making a block.
Exactly.
Function block.
So you are trying to create a block here, or you are actually creating the scope for this function. That means you are creating an area, you are creating a block which is going to define that what the boundary of this function is. Say in Python, if you need to specify what is the boundary of a function, you specify it with the help of indentation. Right? Let's say if you have written 4 statements with the same indentation within a function, then those 4 statements will be considered as part of that particular function. But since in JavaScript, the concept of indentation does not exist. And if the concept of indentation does not exist, how do you define the boundary of a function? So this is how you define the boundary. This is how you define the scope of a function. You define it with the help of curly braces. That means whatever statements, whatever logic that you write within these two curly braces, this will be a part of this particular function ABC. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now what will I do is I will create a variable here where let's say A, I'll assign it with the value 10. I will say console.log A. Fine. Now remember that when you create function, it is not invoked by itself. You will have to explicitly give an invocation for that particular function. Right? So just like it is giving me a suggestion, I have to invoke this function this way. This is pretty much the same that you do in Python. You write the function name, you use these two parentheses, and you provide any parameters that the function accepts. If it does not accept, you pass in this empty. And that's how you call functions. But now this time, I'm not going to call the function. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print the value of A. What do you expect the output now?
10.
No, it's give error, reference error.
Error or reference error.
That's correct. I am going to get an error this time because A is not defined. Now, it might be possible since I have not even invoked this function. So that's why this A, this line, this set of line is not executed at all. So what if I call this function once? Now this line or these two lines will be executed. So maybe A becomes even accessible here at line number 99. What do you think?
No, sir.
10 and reference.
No, sir. So 10 and error.
Yeah, that's correct. So output is going to be 10 and reference error. So here you can understand that though you have created this variable with the var keyword, but still you are not able to access this variable outside these two curly braces. The reason is since this time it is created inside a function, and any variable created inside a function cannot be accessed outside using var keyword.
Sir, so that is why we say that var has a functional scope, right?
That's why.
Because
Yes.
only inside the function.
Yes,
But
that's
it
right.
is not. It is not limited to block scope.
Yes, this is not limited to block scope. That's true as well. We have already seen what is the behavior in block case. The let and const were behaving as they were meant to be, but var was even able to access the value outside that particular scope. But it is not happening here because var has a function-based scope. And since this is created inside a function, it cannot be accessed outside. So is the first difference between the two clear?
No, sir. I have a doubt.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, we can also define here the in place of where let the result will be same.
Yes, the result will
Let
be
and
same.
const can do the same result.
Yeah, of course. See, what you are saying is that let has the block-based scope. So even this is a block.
Means
You can see these two curly braces. Even these two together are forming a block. So let automatically
means
gets
function
restricted
also
here.
forms a block.
Yeah, of course.
Function and blocks are the same thing.
No, of course not.
Okay, but the behavior is the same inside the function and the block.
See, with the help of a function, you are automatically creating a local scope, or you can say a local block. You are creating
Perfect,
it.
sir. Understand.
But
I
if you are
got it.
creating a local
Okay,
block, it does not mean it is a function.
perfect, sir. Okay.
Fine. So shall I assume that the first difference is clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we will talk about the second difference, but before that, or maybe we will talk about the second difference in the next lecture. But before that, I would like to talk about one other thing here.
So just a quick doubt. Like if it
Yes.
had, if it is not limited to function also, where, then we would have seen told that where is a global scope.
Yeah, then you could have said that, yes. Okay. Now, I
Sir,
am going to
one
make a
doubt,
few
sir.
tweaks in this program. Yes.
Sir, in that function level, all the three where let const will be same functioning like in
Yes.
original form.
Exactly same. Yes.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Uh, can someone tell me what is going to be the output of this program?
Undefined and 20.
Sir, undefined and 20.
For undefined and 20.
Undefined
No,
and
no,
20.
it's
So,
I think
is
20
there
2020.
anyone who thinks that the output could be different than
2020.
undefined and 20? Did someone say error?
No, no, it's I think 2020 game.
Okay. So, I have gotten two different combinations so far. One is undefined 20, the other one is 20 twice. Any other possibility that you can think of?
Reference error and 20.
Reference error. Okay, so see, once you have gotten an error, the program won't proceed further.
So undefined and 20.
Okay, undefined at 20. All right, if I'll execute this program, the output will indeed be undefined and 20. But I would like to know, how did you find out the output of this console.log statement is going to be undefined? How? Or
So
why?
because the even though we
Because
have var c over there, we still have not. It hasn't been assigned the value 20 yet. That's why it logs it as undefined.
No, but you have created this variable at line number 88 and you are accessing it at line number 87, which is
Yes,
even before the declaration.
yes.
It's
This is why
reference
it was
before
called.
assignment, right? So
Because
JavaScript
it's JavaScript
declares
interpreter, so that go over line by line.
interprets the declaration at the start of the file.
Hoisting.
Okay, sorry. Uh, let us go by one. Yes, Divya, do you have something to know?
No, sorry.
Harsh?
JavaScript shifts the declaration to the start of the file.
Okay, so there's a new concept that has come up, hosting. Fine. Yeah, I agree with you, Harsh. Yes, that's correct. Any other person who wants to say something?
No, sir. So declaration is happening at the top of the block. So it has not been initialized. We first log it and then initialize it, which is why it gives us an undefined error.
All right. So if this is exactly what you all think, what do you expect the output to be now?
Same.
It should
Undefined
say
and
undefined
reference.
all the time, both the time.
Are you sure? Okay. So see,
So
if I run this program, the
reference error.
output won't remain the same. I am getting an error, cannot access C. I am getting a reference error at line number 87.
Yeah.
So this time the behavior changed. How? Isn't the hosting happening? If I make it var, and if I run it, then I'll get undefined and 20. But as soon as I replace this var with let, I start getting an error. What do you think? What is happening?
Sir, because where keyword is hoisted and let and const is not hoisted.
No, I disagree with this.
So what are you asking, sir, actually?
I'm asking, why is this difference being shown? Why are these two keywords behaving differently when all the values are getting hosted? I'm telling you that no matter which keyword you are using, be it var, let, or const, all the variables are hosted. All the variables.
Okay.
So let is a block level scope. So the scope.
Yeah, I am in the same scope. See, the error which is coming because at line number 87, it is not coming at line number 91. Let me come back again and replace this with let. If I run this, you will see the error will come at line number 87 here.
So sir, we need to fix this error, or we need to tell you why we are getting this error.
Currently, we are discussing how or why this is happening.
Yeah, because the C is not initialized.
So sir, first we need to declare a C variable outside the block. Let's see.
Outside the block.
Only let's see.
Okay, let's say I even declare a variable outside. Do you think will this fix the problem?
No.
We need to
Because it's not
initialize.
initialized.
Okay, let's say initialize it 10.
Sir, we need to call it before line number 87. We need to initialize it.
Yeah, that's what my question is. That why do you need to do it only in case of let? Because when you were replacing this let with var, it was functioning fine.
So the variable, when you use let, the variable is not accessible before the declaration of the code. Even though it is hoisted, it still is not accessible, and hence why we are getting that error.
Well, very good. That's the answer I was looking for. Yes, this is another difference between var and the let and const category. The thing is, okay, the very first thing I would like to talk about is hosting. As one of you actually mentioned about hosting. So let us first talk about hosting. Can one of you please explain what actually hosting is, as you have already mentioned about it?
It's like moving the declaration to the top of the program.
Yes. Moving the declaration to the top of the what?
Program or block.
Yeah, I would not say program. I would use a keyword called scope here.
Yeah,
I would say that hosting works scope-wise. It does not host all the variables to the top of the program, but it actually works based on the scope.
So scope means it can be block or function.
Yes. Now, why I'm saying it's scope here is because if you think about this, and if you are creating this variable let here, okay, then in that case, this variable declaration will be created after this line number 86, but it will not be done at the top of the program. So that is why I have written scope here. Because if the declaration for this variable is even happening at the top of the program, then this does not get restricted to the block level. That means you can still access it even outside these two curly braces, which will not be true. So that is why the declaration will only be moved to the top of their respective scopes. Right. Now, since we have introduced this new term hosting,
I'm
it's time to
sorry,
actually...
I'm a little confused. When you use var, var c is equal to 20, then we could actually do console.log at line number 85.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
of course you can do that? Yes, if you do it var, then you can definitely do that. If I do it, you will get undefined twice and then 20. See. Right?
Now I'm
Because
confused. Yeah, now I'm confused.
Why are we
as I told
getting
you, that
undefined?
hosting will move the declaration of the variable to the top of its scope, the scope of that particular variable. Now, I would like to know that what is the scope of this variable called C? Since it is created with the keyword where, what is going to be the scope? Where has the function based scope? And since we have not used functions at all here, that means the scope becomes global for this variable. Do you agree with this?
Yes.
And if this becomes global, that means its declaration will actually be done at the top of the program. At the top of the program.
Agreed. Then why couldn't it print on line number 85?
Just a minute. Line number 85. It is printing it. It is printing it to be undefined.
But haven't we declared the variable if it's become global and it's at the top of the function, then why isn't it printing it at line number 85?
See,
It's saying
only the
it's
declaration
undefined.
is being moved. Only the declaration is being moved, not the initialization part. You are just telling the interpreter that such a variable exists in the program, but the value will only be initialized when this line number 88 will be executed.
Okay.
So that's why I have only written moving the declaration. It is not the initialization.
Okay. But then if instead of doing that in line number 85, we did anything with C, then that value of the variable would change.
Yeah, the value. Okay, so see what you are doing is if you're saying C equals to 20 here, that means, okay, not 20. If you're doing 10 here, so you are saying that at this point, the variable of C becomes 10. So here,
Right.
the value of C will be 10. And after that, here it will become 20. So if I click on run, so you can see it is 10 and 20.
Okay. So it's the declaration which is moved up, not the value of the.
Exactly. That's why I have written declaration only.
Okay, it just knows that such a variable C will exists.
Yes.
But the value will be given at 88.
Yes. Yeah. I'm again repeating it that only the declarations are moved to the top and not the initialization. Maybe I can mention it explicitly here, not initialization. It is only the declaration which is getting moved up.
So can you now show it with let? Just I'll see the difference.
So if I make it let, and if you do let C equals to 10 here, and if you click on run, the answer still says that you cannot use this C.
So remove let like you did for where, right?
Yeah,
You mean
in
here?
line number 85.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're doing is you are trying to create the same variable, but with two different keywords, right? Still works the same.
So why it's for where that we are able to assign a value without declaring it?
Okay, so see, if you create a variable without using any of these keywords, then by default, the where keyword will be used with it. By default, it will be created with the where keyword. But in that case, there is a one drawback. The drawback is that the hosting will not happen for such variables. So just to clarify this, what I'm saying is that if you create a variable without actually using any of the keywords, where, let, or const, let's say you do it like this, 10. And now if you do console.log C here, what do you think? What is the output? I am telling you that by default, the keyword that will be used for creating this variable is going to be where, but it will not be hosted. That means its declaration will not be moved to the top. What will happen?
So undefined.
Referencer.
Exactly, it is going to be an error because the declaration is not available at that particular line number. Right? This time, even the declaration is not available. And if the declaration is not available, at this point of time, the interpreter will ask, what is C? Where did this come from? So that's why it is going to generate an error at this point. Are you getting it?
Okay, so if
Yes,
we don't specify the keyword, then it will be where, and but it won't be
It will
hosted,
be
right?
where, yeah, it will become where by default, but the drawback is it will not be hosted further.
So why is it that we can redeclare that like you did in 88 line before you were using where?
So you can
So
redeclare you can redeclare the variables created using var, but that cannot, the same thing cannot be done for let and const.
Using where keyword, is it? Okay.
Yes, var keyword, you can do that. Let's say what I do is I do var a equals to 10 and var a equals to 20. This is perfectly fine. There will be no problem. So if I click on run, no output is coming because the program is working fine. It is not generating any error. But if I replace this var with let here, then the program will start generating error. I say let here and let here. And if I click on run, so it is giving me an error. Identifier A has already been declared.
Okay, sir.
So, sir, does that mean that var, the variables with the var, they don't go into temporal dead zone and others goes to the temporal dead zone?
Well, I didn't really wanted to touch the topic temporal dead zone in today's session. That's why I said that we will discuss the next reason or the next difference between the two in the next session. But yes, to answer your question, that's correct. The variables created using var, they don't go into temporal dead zone, but the variables created using let and const, they do.
Okay, sir.
So what is that?
What is temporal dead zone for the knowledge of others? We will discuss it in one of the further sessions.
Sir, 1 minute.
Yeah, tell me.
Do we have to write the semicolon after every statement?
Well, I'm glad that you asked this question here. So see, in JavaScript, putting semicolons at the end of the statement is not mandatory, but is recommended. So see, what happens is, let me try to explain you scenarios. What happens if you put semicolons, or what happens if you do not? So a simple enough program, let's say let a equals to 20 and console.log a. Now, if you're putting semicolons, if you click on run, this works fine. You are getting the output to be 20. If I remove the semicolon, this still works fine. I will get the output as 20. But the problem comes when you try to put two statements in the same line. So what I'm trying to do is, right now, this A was being declared and initialized at line number 95, and it was accessed at line number 96. But now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to move this line number 96 to line number 95 itself. Now, if you will try to run this program, it is going to be an error. So you can see it is an error. But if you put semicolons in order to differentiate or in order to identify that this marks the end of the current statement, then it won't be an error. It will still work.
Sir, what will be output when space between 20 and console? Instead of yes.
Instead of semicolon.
Yes, sir.
It will be an error.
Okay, sir.
So, as I said before, it is not mandatory, but it is recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Fine. Now, I would like yes.
What is the difference between undefined and the reference error?
Undefined and?
Reference error.
See, reference error is reference error is simply an error. Undefined is a value, or you can say is a data type. They both are two entirely different things. Reference error is just an error that you will get in your program. But undefined is the value or is the data type that you will be using while writing your programs.
Okay.
And to further discuss about undefined, I would now like to discuss that how the execution of a JavaScript program happens right from the start. So I shall navigate to a paint screen. Now I am going to be discussing that how a JavaScript program actually executes. For that, I am writing a simple enough JavaScript program here. Let's say, let's say variable A, variable B, and console dot log a. Then let me create a function here as well. Function ABC. What does it do is, let's say it accepts a parameter a, and what it does is it returns you the square. It returns you the square of this function, and I am calling this ABC function with a parameter of, let's say, 4 here, and I am okay. I cannot use a now, so maybe I will use c here, and then d will call it with a different parameter, say 5. So this is a simple enough JavaScript program that I'm writing here, and now I would like to explain you that how such a program will actually execute behind the scenes, but all things will happen behind the scenes. So the very first thing that you have to understand here is whenever a JavaScript program begins its execution, it creates an execution context. I'm repeating this statement. Whenever JavaScript program starts executing, it creates an execution context. Execution context. Now, what is this execution context? This will probably become clear when we will talk about this. This keyword, or you can say this reference. You might know about this from languages like Java. You might know about this from languages like Python, where you use self in place of this. So whenever JavaScript program executes, for now, you can understand it as it creates an execution context. And for the very first initialization, it creates a GEC. GEC means global execution context. So execution context is short for EC, and G stands for global here. So every JavaScript program actually creates a GEC, which is known as global execution context. And what is execution context? For now, for the sake of today's session, you can understand it as this big box that I have created here. So this is the execution context. And now this big box will be partitioned into 2 small boxes. So I am going to create a partition here. And now I have got 2 boxes here. I have got 2 partitions here, and each of that partition is going to refer to a different process that will actually run while executing a JavaScript program. And those 2 processes are, one is, okay, I can probably write it here, memory allocation. Memory allocation. So the left-hand side partition here of this big box, I will be using this block for memory allocation, and the second block here, I would use it for thread of execution. Thread of execution. So see, there is nothing fancy or there is nothing difficult to understand, at least between these 2 partitions that I have created here, because pretty much every programming language follows the same concept. What will happen is, firstly, whatever variables, whatever functions that you have created in your program, the memory for those things have to be allocated so that the program can start its execution. And the same thing happens even in JavaScript. When the global execution context for the program is created, it is partitioned into 2 separate things. The first block that I'm using here, the memory allocation phase will occur. After creating the GEC, the very first thing that happens is the memory allocation phase. What happens in memory allocation phase is JavaScript actually tries to allocate the memory for all the variables and the functions that exist in the program. Can you tell me what all variables and functions exist in a program that I have written here?
Sir, where?
Okay, where A, where B, let C, and let D, right?
Yes, sir.
I have also created this function. So for this function also, the memory will be allocated. But what about this A? Do you think that the memory for this A would also be created?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Well, the memory will not be created in the GEC phase. When the GEC is created and the memory allocation is happening, for that part of at least at that particular instant, the function local variables will not be allocated the memory. I will tell you when they will be allocated the memory. They need to be allocated the memory, but not at this point. It will be done at a later point in the program. I will tell you about that. But for now, let's create or let's allocate memory for the variables that exist in this program. It is A, it is B, it is C, it is D, and this function called ABC. ABC. And now let's talk about what is the value that each of this variable or the function will actually hold here. Now, I hope all of you understand that if the memory is getting allocated, there will be at least some data that will be present at that particular memory location. What do you think? What each of this variable will actually hold at the time of memory allocation, because the initialization has not happened?
Undefined.
Undefined, exactly. So each of this variable, as I told you, each of this variable will be allocated the memory, and by default they will get the value undefined. So each of them will get the value undefined. See, even if you have written a console.log statement, even on the top, console.log, and let's say you have written A here, then even before executing this statement, we have not even executed one line of code, and all of these things are happening. The memory allocation is happening. And because of this, since memory allocation is happening here, only because of this thing, the concept of hosting, the behavior of hosting is possible here. Because when the value of a variable or when the memory for a variable is actually allocated, then only you can say that this variable actually exists here. In the very first line of the program, you are trying to access a variable with the name A, which is not even created in the program so far. But since in the memory it exists, that's why you will be able to access its value, and the value that you will get on the output is going to be undefined. This is how the hosting is working behind the scenes. When I am telling you that hosting means moving the declaration to the top of their respective scopes, this is what it means. That in memory allocation phase, the memory for all those variables is getting allocated.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah, tell me.
So since this JavaScript is a dynamic language, not static, so it
Okay.
will read line by line and execute the code.
You mean it is interpreted language?
Yes, sir. Interpreted, dynamic interpreted.
Yes.
So it will
I
execute line by line, sir.
Yes, I agree to your question, but what happens in the actual JavaScript execution is they actually use JITs, or you can say they actually use a combination of compilers plus interpreter. Compilers plus interpreter. The combination of both is actually used for the modern execution, because we are also talking about the optimization processes. And in order to achieve some level of optimization, the combination of these two is actually required. So when you are using compiler, you are actually seeing the entire program. And when you are seeing the entire program, then only you will be able to find out which all variables need to be allocated in the memory. But when the program execution will occur, then of course we will go line by line.
Okay, sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, memory allocation for ABCD is okay. What about for the function ABC?
Even the functions have to be allocated the memory. Yes, they do require memory. And yeah, I forgot to talk about the value that this function is hold. Can someone tell me what value will this function hold? Will it be undefined? What do you think? What will be the value of the function?
I don't think it will be defined. It will be undefined.
Undefined.
Okay. Well, in case of functions, the value is not undefined, but the literal definition is actually pasted as it is. That means whatever the definition of this function is, it will be pasted as it is. So if it says return A multiply A, then this is how the value for this function will be provided in the memory. The literal definition of this function will be given as its value. I will talk about one of its example, but for now, let me first complete this particular program. So all the variables are by default initialized with the value undefined, and the function, they are initialized with their actual definition itself. Now,
So yeah,
after the memory,
just one
yes,
question.
yes,
When we define the function ABC, we put in brackets A. Do we have to define A prior to this? Because is it just a coincidence that you have defined var A is, you have
let me make
initialized?
it X. Let me make it X. It need not be the same. It could be anything.
So we don't have to define that value beforehand.
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. You don't need to.
Okay.
Fine. Okay. Now, the memory allocation phase is completed. The memory for all the variables as well as the function has now been allocated in this particular program. After this is done, we shall move to the next process, which is going to be thread of execution. And what happens in thread of execution is the code actually starts executing. Now, since JavaScript is known as interpreted language, it will happen line by line. It will happen synchronously. So we shall head to the very first line of the program, which says console.log A. What do you think? What happens with console.log A? It will try to find out what the value of A is. Will it find it in the memory?
No, sir.
No.
Yes, it
Yes,
will
sir.
find it in the memory. The
It
A
will
exists.
find.
Yes, A exists. So the value that will be shown onto the console is going to be undefined. So the console.log will execute in this way. It will try to find out if A exists in the memory. Yes, it does. So it will try to print its current value. The current value is undefined. Do you all agree with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Next line, it will say where A. Where A, well, the declaration is already done. So this will be ignored. Nothing happens here. And let's say just after where A, I would say A equals to 10. Sorry for introducing this in between, but yeah, just for the sake of understanding, I'm introducing this new line. And when the control reaches here, it will say, is a variable with the name A exists in the memory? Yes, it does. Then overwrite its value with the value 10. So now the value of A, which was initially undefined, it will be overwritten with the new value of 10. Now, after that, whenever A will be used, the value that will be shown onto the console is going to be 10 and not undefined because it is already overwritten in the memory. Are you getting it here?
Yes, sir.
Fine. We shall move to the next line where B, the declaration is already happened. So we shall move to the next statement. Console.log A. This time, when the value of A gets printed onto the console, what will be the value? Undefined or what?
10 only.
10.
It will be 10. So the next output that gets shown onto the console is 10. The first output is undefined. The next is 10. After that, it will see function. Well, it sees, okay, I have already allocated the memory for the function. I don't need to anything with it. I don't need to anything with it. I don't need to anything with it. I don't need to do anything with it. Now, something happens here. And what happens here is very interesting. Whenever you call a function, please listen to this statement very carefully. Whenever you call a function, a new execution context for that function actually gets created. Remember, when I started creating this box, I told you that this is an execution context or GEC, global execution context. Now, whenever you are calling a function, just give me a minute, please. Yeah, okay. Sorry for the delay. What I was telling you is, yes. So I was telling you that whenever you invoke a function in your program, an entire new execution context will be created. An entire new execution context. And what is an execution context? The same box. The same box which we created for GEC execution, global execution context. And the same things will actually repeat. The memory allocation phase, the thread of execution, All of these things will have to be repeated for this newly created execution context. And this newly execution context is going to be known as FEC. That is function execution context. Initially, we named it as global execution context. Now I am saying that it is a function execution context. The same things will repeat. Memory allocation phase will happen. What happens in memory allocation? Can someone tell me? For this particular function execution context, for what all variables the memory will be allocated? Can someone tell me?
The variable that is passed into, like,
yes, the local variables of the function, which is only x here. So x will be allocated the memory, and by default it will be given undefined. But now, since this ABC function is invoked with the value 4, so this undefined will automatically be overwritten by what value?
4.
It will be overwritten by the value 4. And after that, it will try to find out what is x multiply x is. So 4 multiply 4 is 16. That's all this function execution context does. It gets the value 16. As soon as it sees this return statement, this function execution context will be destroyed. This newly created FEC will be destroyed as soon as it sees the or encounter the return statement, and it will resume or it will return to the same place from where it came from. So it actually came from this place, and ultimately what will happen is C is going to get a new value, which is going to be what you have gotten from this function execution context. It is 16.
So if inside this function I use a variable that is defined globally, like, so
how can you define a global variable inside a function?
No, if we try to access that variable, then does it assign that inside this FEC?
Yes, of course. See, this FEC is actually a child of this GEC. So the variables that you have created in GEC will automatically be accessible here in FEC. But what you have created in FEC, they won't be accessible in GEC.
Okay.
Now, since this function execution context got cleared or it got deleted from the memory, and it has overwritten the value of C. So C has now gotten the new value 16. But after overwriting the value of C, what happens is you move to the next line, and here you see that ABC has to be invoked again. In that case, the same thing repeats itself. A brand new function execution context gets created. The memory allocation phase happens. X first gets the value undefined, then gets overwritten by 5. It computes whatever the function does. It says 5 multiply 5. It gets the value 25. As soon as it sees return statement, this gets destroyed, and the variable D gets the value 25.
Sir, I have a question.
After that, even the GEC will get destroyed as soon as this function execution gets over. Yes, now tell me.
Yeah, my question is before function ABC with the variable X, what if we had defined the variable X and we had declared it and we had given it a value? Then when we...
You mean in GEC? You have given it in GEC?
Yes. So in our JavaScript itself, when we had written the function ABC, just before that, if we had declared a variable X and given it a value, and later when it reaches the let C is equal to ABC4, so does the X get replaced?
No. See, the X that you are creating in GEC and the X that you are creating in this FEC, they both are two different variables. And this function will only read what it X tell you. I mean, the local variable or the FEC variable.
Okay. And what if
the FECX variable, if the FECX variable does not exist, then it will try to read it from GEC. But if it is available here itself, then it will not read it from GEC.
Okay, somewhat similar to what Python does.
Exactly, yes.
But what if we had given it, say we had made declared it as a constant X, then what would happen? And we're using the same X in function. Now, are these two different?
As I told you, this X is a different variable altogether.
Okay, it's
so
completely different.
Doesn't really matter.
Okay, even if the notation or the symbol is the same, they're treated as two different variables.
Of course, yes. The name is just the same. It's only the name.
Okay.
But in the memory, there are two different variables.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, in function level, can we take a like in our function? I take the value of a is equal to 10, and in function level, can I use that value?
Yes, this variable a is accessible inside the function execution context. The reason is this is a child of GEC. So whatever exists in FEC or the GEC, that can be used inside FEC, but the vice versa is not true.
Okay, sir.
All right. So is this process clear to all? That how is the execution of a JavaScript is performed behind the scenes? Of course, you will get a clarity over what actually the execution context is going forward into the sessions when we will get to know about this reference. Shall I assume that it is clear to all?
Not clear, sir.
Yes, one question.
Yes, tell me.
So, if we pick a variable where that is being used inside the function, I mean, which has a global scope,
So where does not have a global scope?
No, what I'm saying is, if you can give one example where you have a variable with a global scope used inside a function.
It's okay, that's fine. So let's say I can create a variable here, say x, whose value is 10. I create a function here, say ABC. Let's say this makes use of, or this accepts another variable called y. And what it does is it simply returns you the sum of x plus y. And I am trying to print the value of ABC and I'm going to pass it 2. So if I click on run, I will get 12. So the value of x being taken from here, from this scope, from GEC 10, and y is being passed.
Okay, thank you. So, but when it comes to the same name, if I define it as x instead of inside
then the output will be 2 plus 2, 4 only. If you make it x, then this x will actually shadow this x.
Okay.
So this x will be utilized. So you will get 4 only.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
All right.
Sir, I have one question. So initially you had used function ABC and brackets A. So had that been the case, then when we're doing the FEC, then the A value will be taken as 10 from GEC, or will it be undefined when creating the first FEC?
If you don't pass A while calling the function, it will be undefined. It will not be taken from GEC. The function parameters have to be provided. So let's say if you are not passing anything to this function, then how does it read it? It reads it as undefined. You are getting undefined.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I'm pretty much done with what I wanted to cover in today's session. In the next session, we are going to be talking about things like temporal dead zone and a few other differences between the two categories of keywords for creating variables in JavaScript, var and latent const. So hopefully today's session might have been helpful to many of you, those of you who are starting with the JavaScript. And yeah, going forward, we will be discussing a lot of such interesting things.
Sir, one more doubt, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, is JavaScript is different from Java languages?
Of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
sir.
Java is a completely different language.
Okay, sir.
I have a quick question. I joined quite late, only in the last 15 minutes. Is the session being recorded?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. If you can
So
share the
paste the live
link,
streaming for the session today.
it will really be helpful. Thank you.
Sir, one more question.
Yeah. Tell me.
Sir, from which week onwards I can make a project? Well, like 4 week after I can start my project, Mac to project.
You can start it from week 3 onwards.
Week 3 onwards. Okay, well after
In week
JavaScript
3,
session.
we will introduce Vue.js, and
Okay.
you will require Vue.js to build your project. The first 2
Okay,
weeks
okay.
will be all about JavaScript. You have to,
So,
or we have to build your foundations in JavaScript.
okay, okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Shalendra, do
So
you have
One
something to say?
One quick question I have in case the other
Yes,
gentleman
Ravi.
has not. Yeah. If you are just explaining this part when I joined console.log of A,
Mhm.
A is not defined prior. So at that instance of time, it will automatically say there is a variable A and then call it undefined.
If the
Or
memory is allocated for that variable, it will say undefined. But if the memory is not even allocated, then it will say reference error.
okay, prior to that, there should be some reference of A, is what you're saying?
Yes,
Var A or
that
something.
is what is happening in the memory allocation. It is already parsing the entire program and allocating memory for all the variables. So it is creating a reference for all those variables in the memory beforehand.
Great. So if we take only the set of lines that are there on the right side, and the starting itself is console.log of A. So there it'll, because it's the first line of the code, it'll automatically say there is a memory reference error, is it?
No. See, even before executing the first line of this program, the memory
Mhm.
allocation phase would have already completed. And if the memory allocation phase is already completed, that means all these variables are already allocated the memory, A, B, and all.
Okay.
So that's
So
why when you do console.log, when you execute the very first line of this code that I have written here,
Mhm.
A already exists in the memory with the value undefined. So that's why it will say undefined.
Okay. Okay. So at the time of compilation is when it starts allocating the memory. Did I get it right?
Before reaching this thread of execution phase, it does memory allocation. So after creating this GEC, the very first thing that happens is memory allocation.
Okay. Perhaps I have to see the video and get the context. Okay.
Yeah, in case
I'll go
you
to the
don't
video,
have
and if there is a
Yeah, of course. Yes, fine. Yes, Suresh, you have something to ask?
Yes, sir. So from this lesson, what I'm seeing is, so where has a function level scope when there is a function. So if there is no function, it is a global scope, correct?
That's true. Yes.
And let and const only have block level scope, and if there is no block, then it could uh, be the same definition throughout the program. Is it that
Yeah,
way?
in case you don't have any blocks or don't have any functions at all, then they are gonna behave pretty much the same. If you keep that temporal dead zone thing aside.
Okay, so I think I will get it more clear. If where has only a function or block level scope, same as let and const, then why would we need a let and const? Yeah, I'm trying to understand that part.
See, let and const were introduced in a later version of JavaScript in the ES6. Because what happens, the problem with var is that its scope is not restricted to that particular scope or to the particular block. It is only restricted within the function. So many a times there is a possibility that you don't want the access of a variable from the other scope in a local scope. And that is where it becomes complicated because var does not support this behavior. And that is why these two new keywords, let and const, were introduced in the ES6 version of JavaScript.
Sir, in the example which we saw, that ABC function, so we use the same variable A or X, which we tried. So I think we defined it as var, and when it comes to function level X, the precedence takes to only the function level variable, right? I mean, this
Yeah,
even
of course,
though.
means the precedence will be given to the local function. See, this is how the scope change works. It will first try to see if it exists in my current execution context. If it exists here, I will pick it up from there. If it does not exist, I will move to my parent execution context. If it is found there, it will be picked up from there. Otherwise, it will try to see if there is another parent execution context that exists. If it does not exist, it will throw an error. Otherwise, it will keep on checking into the parent execution context.
Okay, so this is in context with where. Okay, here is where the difference comes for let and const. So let will not check its parent level, when there is a function or block.
No, see.
Okay.
If you are creating variables inside a function, then this thing does not really apply. I'm talking about how the variable will be looked upon in the entire program.
Okay, so whatever the definitions maybe, is it? Or is it particular for where?
I didn't get it. Come again, please.
I mean, whatever we are talking about, is it in the context of where or?
I am only talking in context of the function parameters, or not actually the function parameters, but instead the values that are using in the function. So just to give you a quick example, see, if I have created this function here, I am only expecting x to come while calling this function. Apart from this x, let's say if I create a new variable called y here, and I say that I want to add x with a value called, say, z, with a value called, say, b, something like this. Now, only these two variables will be looked into the scope chain, whereas this variable, this x, this won't be.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Because this x you have created within this function only. The memory for this x is created when the FEC for this function got created.
Okay. Okay, so got it. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Prashant?
So can you go to that paint annotating? So here, there is a function ABC which takes a parameter x.
Yeah.
So suppose before the function, if we had assigned value to variable x, then the function will look into the parent you set.
No, it won't. See, x is a parameter to that function, so it will never look into the scope chain. If it is not provided while calling the function, while invoking the function, it will by default get its own value, which is undefined. See, try to understand that this variable will be allocated the memory in the FEC. So there won't be the case when the variable will not be found in the current function execution context. So it will never look into the parent. See, what will happen is a new FEC is getting created. X got the memory here. No matter whether you passed its value while calling that function or not, whenever you will try to access this X within this function, it will always be found in the current function execution context itself. So if it is already found here, why will it even look it into the parent?
Okay, sir, because it is an argument, it won't look. But if we in the return, if you write x into a, x multiplied by a,
in that case, yes.
Then
in that case, that's true. So just like I have done it here, if z does not exist in this function, then it will try to look upon the scope chain.
Okay, sir. And one more doubt, can you show that page?
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, here we use var a, and so in the memory allocation, it defined it as undefined initially because of hoisting. But if you had used let or const, then
even the let and const, they will be initialized with the same value undefined only. But there is a concept of temporal dead zone that we have not discussed yet.
Okay, sir. So that is why
even the let and const will get the value, will get the same value undefined, the same value.
But it will show reference error. It will not be undefined.
It will show reference error, and yes, there is a reason for that. And it will get cleared when we discuss about TDZ, temporal dead zone.
Okay, sir. And also, I would like to experiment with different types, like the same thing, and the memory allocation thread of execution. I would like to see. So, is there any website?
Yes,
I
you can do it in the browser itself. You can do it in the browser itself.
And see this memory allocation thread of execution and this it will.
What you can do is you can use breakpoints in your program. So when you execute your program in browser, you can put a breakpoint at the very first line of the program itself. So even before your first line of the program gets executed, you will get to know what all things have happened before. Maybe I can show you a demo in the next session for that.
Yes, like a Python tutor.
Yeah, I understand your point. Yes.
Okay, sir.
Sir, are we done for today or will you be covering something more?
No, we are done for today.
I'm a little doubtful because I was looking at the programming assignment and I don't think I'm able to do it with the knowledge that I have so far.
Yeah, don't worry. The next session will also happen soon. But what is the deadline of your assignment?
That's 26. There's still time.
Okay, fine. Yeah, don't worry. We will probably be having a couple of more sessions before the deadline occurs.
So, do we have the session on Tuesday?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
So this session on Tuesday is at 6, isn't it?
Timing, just a
Oh,
minute.
sorry, 8:30 to 9:30, no, 10:30. Perfect.
Yeah, correct. It is
Yeah.
in the evening, 8:30. Yes.
Yeah, that works. That works. Definitely works.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Stop presenting.
Thank you, sir.
All right, then. Thank you guys for joining with us. We'll see you in the next session. Till then, bye bye and take care.
Yeah, sir. Thank you, sir.